So, in the first part of this episode, we talked about the best away venues for visiting teams and where they have performed really well. So, in this segment, let's talk about India's best away victories of 21st century.
Yes, and in this segment, I think we should discuss about the greatest memories as Test cricket fans that we have. And to begin with, I think we should start by discussing the famous victory that India were able to achieve in Headingley in 2002 when India won the Test match by an innings and 46 runs.
As Manjeet has already said, it is very difficult to score runs in England for any subcontinent team. Getting a good first inning scores is always considered imperative if you are visiting, and especially when the wickets are quite damp and conducive to swing bowling in England. And Rahul Dravid and Sachin Tendulkar played a gem in that first innings to set up a huge score of 628 runs.
Yes, and if you would remember, Saurav Ganguly also got 100 in that match. And to mention, Sanjay Bangar as an opener was really good in that innings because he played out 230 odd deliveries for his 68 runs. And that was really important to negate the new ball in those conditions. India were able to win a test match in England after almost 15 years. So, yes, that was one of the famous victories that we recorded early in the 21st century.
And credit must be given to the Indian captain Ganguly because to play two spinners on a wicket that is completely aiding and assisting fast bowlers and swing bowlers, and the wicket was not a dry wicket; it was a damp wicket at Headingley. To play the young Harbhajan Singh in that match was a brave call because Kumble was already an established player by then, so he was an automatic selection. But to play an off spinner at Headingley, I think the credit must be given to the captain.
Yes, and it can be considered as the starting point of a decade that was dominated by India at home, and India did really well in abroad test matches as well in that decade. And this victory was an epitome, or you can say the beginning of good things to come for Indian cricket team. And a year later, India were able to win a test match in Australia in Adelaide, and I think it was one of the most famous victories for India till date in any overseas venue.
So, at a time when VVS Lakshman and Rahul Dravid's heroics at the Kolkata Test in 2001 were still fresh in the fans' minds, these two star batsmen rose to the occasion once again, this time in Adelaide, and India sealed a great victory down under. So, of course, Rahul Dravid's innings of 233 and 72 are well remembered. But then there were some other players who made their own respective contributions. So, VVS Lakshman scored 148 in the first innings. Then you had Anil Kumble who picked up 5 wickets in the first innings for India, and then Ajit Agarkar who took 6. So it was an all-round performance from the entire team, and that's what enabled India to secure a win.
And one great thing in that match was India were down and out at 85 for 4, and they were trailing by over 500 runs in the first innings itself, and 88, 85 for 4, and then this huge 303 run partnership would have given nightmares to the Australian team, and they would have had thoughts of the history repeating itself at Adelaide.
So the sequence of events was similar to the one that happened in Kolkata 2 years ago, but fortunately the Indian team steadied. Australia did not get a chance to enforce the follow-on, and despite that, India played really well to defeat Australia at their home soil.
And now, as we are talking about the famous test victories for India in away venues in the 21st century, we cannot get past the victory in Trent Bridge that India were able to achieve in 2007. And surprisingly, or a distinct feature of this match was the hero of the match was a bowler, and I'm talking about Zahir Khan and his spell in the first and the second innings. India have over the years done well and won test matches abroad on the basis of the great batting lineup that we've always had. And this was the first test match in which a bowler was in the limelight, and Zahir Khan was the man of the match in that victory. Now, India won that match by 7 wickets and were able to win the Test series 1-0 as well. And Zahir Khan, as I mentioned, was the man of the match, for he took 9 wickets in the match, which was a great performance considering that Zahir Khan was making a Test match comeback in that year. So yes, the victory was a special one, as well as the series victory was special as well. This Test series is also famous for the draw that India were able to secure in the Test match at Lords with Mahendra Singh Dhoni at the crease with 9 wickets down, and India were battling to save the match. So yes, this was a memorable series for us Indians because at the end we were able to win it.
So we have discussed the famous victory at Adelaide in 2003. So another victory for India that came down under was in 2008. Of course, it was a very controversial series with poor umpiring decisions and the monkey gate scandal. But then India had something to cheer about because India secured a 72-run victory. And surprisingly, Irfan Pathan was the man of the match in that particular game. He came in at number 3 in the second innings, scored a handy 46 runs, and he took 2 wickets in the first innings and 3 in the second. So for his all-round performance, he was awarded the man of the match. And then Rahul Dravid was unfortunate to miss out on a well-deserved century. He was dismissed for 93 in the first innings. India really came back hard in the second innings and set Australia a decent total, which they were unable to chase.
Yes, and in those days, even if Australia were 4 or 5 down, it was never over because they had a long tail and a great batsman batting at number 6 and 7, Adam Gilchrist. And it was always a challenge for the Indians to wipe away the tail, even after getting 4 or 5 early wickets. And in fact, it still remains one of the biggest headaches for the Indian team.
Yes, and as you talked about the long batting lineup that Australia had, and with the tail of good capability, I remember in the fourth innings when Australia were chasing that total, they got really close with almost 70-75 runs to win that match. And Mitchell Johnson was batting on a half century when the last wicket fell. So yes, it was really close at the end, but India managed to win that test match. Now I remember this test match for one other reason. Ishant Sharma, the youngster, was consistently nagging away Ponting's defenses, and in this test match also he had his number.
And this series was a revelation for Ishant Sharma. And a breakthrough performance like that against the great Ricky Ponting was surely gonna improve his resume for the coming tours.
Now let us discuss about a great performance by the Indian cricket team in South Africa. I'm talking about the test match in Kingsmead, Durban during the 2010-11 test series that we had, that we were able to draw in South Africa 1-1, and we were able to win this test match by 87 runs.
I remember this series for one particular reason, the encounter, the mouth-watering clash between Dale Steyn and Sachin Tendulkar, where it would be enthralling for the viewers and the audience of who will come out on top after the match was over.
Yes, and I also remember that this was the series in which Sachin Tendulkar got his coveted 50th test ton in centurion. And yes, for many reasons, it was a memorable series. But talking about this match specifically, I remember in the fourth innings, South Africa was chasing around 300 odd runs to win, and they were finally all out for 215. But I remember Srishant steaming in and bouncing out Jack Callis, who was pretty much well set at that point of time. And yes, the bowlers did really well in this match to win us this test match.
And we talked about the enthralling encounter between Dale Steyn and Sachin Tendulkar. Another interesting battle within this test series was Graham Smith versus Zahir Khan, because it always looked like Zahir Khan had his number of Graham Smith. and always looked like picking up his wicket. This Test series was very competitive, and India competed really well in the two Test matches of the three Test series.
Now we discussed about India's win in Trent Bridge in 2007. And after that tour in 2011, as we all remember, it was a debacle for India, losing the Test series 4-0. But in 2014, when India toured England, there was a ray of sunshine and a ray of hope when India took the lead by winning the Test match at Lord's, and it was a famous win because of the venue that Lord's is, as well as for the performances by Ajinkya Rahane as well as Ishant Sharma in that match.
So as we all know, Lords is the mecca of cricket. So a victory at this very ground is something that is very much cherished, not just by the team, but by the fans and the media and the public, virtually everyone in India. So the last time India managed to register a win at Lords was way back in 1986, and by this time the Indian fans were desperate to see their team win at the Lords cricket ground. So of course, when Ravindra Jadeja effected a run out to dismiss James Anderson, and when India finally won the match, I remember it was all over the media. The whole day, the Indian media was celebrating that finally India managed to secure a win at Lords after a really long gap. So this match does have its own significance.
Yes, and the stage was perfectly set for the series to follow because Indians had started really well even in the first Test match, and winning a Test match at Lord's, it was all leading up to a Test series victory in England, which is very rare. But then all went downhill, and everything went disarray after this Test match.
This particular test series is memorable for some other reasons as well. This because this is when Bhuvneshwar Kumar and Mohammad Shami, India's brilliant fast bowlers, they managed to get half centuries. And this is also the series when Sir Alistair Cook got his only test dismissal when he had Ishan Sharma caught behind. So this is some other angles to this particular test series.
And Manjit, I remember press and the whole media, the English media, were after Alistair Cook to quit the captaincy after that second Test match debacle for England because losing a Test match against India in England at Lord's was completely unacceptable. And Alistair Cook himself was going through a string of failures and was batting very poorly in fact, up to that point. And unfortunately, there were some other casualties in the third Test when he was dropped off, and that really extended his career.
Yes, and Jadeja was the culprit. As far as I remember, it was Jadeja who dropped Alistair Cook of Pankaj Singh's bowling, and it was catastrophic for Pankaj Singh's career because he never played a test match for India again. And you know, Alistair Cook went on to do really well in the coming years, and he was finally able to retire a series later when India toured England in 2018, and he got 100 in his final test match. So we've discussed about our famous wins in the last couple of decades, but I believe that no victory comes closer to the victory that we achieved in Australia late in 2018. A series victory, winning two test matches in Australia and lifting the trophy for the first time since we started playing test cricket. I think we should discuss about our test victories in 2018 Adelaide as well as the Boxing Day test victory in Melbourne.
Although many fans and many critics and naysayers have said that this victory was not a huge one because this team didn't have their best batsmen, David Warner and Steven Smith, but I still would rate this Test series victory as one of the best Test series victories coming away from home. Jasprit Bumrah had tasted a fair amount of success before coming on this tour, but this tour really marked his arrival because he was the go-to man and suddenly became the go-to bowler for Virat Kohli in this Test series.
Yes, and I remember the bowling that he did in the Boxing Day test match and the slower ball that he bowled to Sean Marsh just before the stroke of lunch. It was a turning point in that match, but for the ball that he was able to bowl at that point of time, it required a sheer piece of brilliance and the thinking behind the execution. So yes, Jasprit Bumrah was the find of the series because he did really well, and I believe that series was really special for Cheteshwar Pujara as well because I think he played exceptionally well in the complete series.
Yes, and Cheteshwar Pujara is someone who is often criticized for slow scoring rate. But then this is the kind of person you need, someone who can anchor the innings, stay put at one end, and keep adding runs to the board. So we have discussed matches that involved Rahul Dravid's heroics so far in this episode, and I'm really happy that India has really found a suitable replacement, kind of you can say, for Rahul Dravid in the form of Cheteshwar Pujara. And not just did he score in Australia, but then when he returned to India, he immediately got back to the first class domestic tournaments, and he continued his form there as well.
For any captain to be termed as successful, winning in Australia is definitely on the top of the list. And Virat Kohli did that very early in his captaincy career. So this victory would surely be the one which he would rejoice even after he retires. We come to the end of this episode. We hope you enjoyed this episode. We hope you also love watching those hard, gritty battles on very difficult pitches against some outstanding top-notch bowlers of highest pedigree. If you like this episode, do follow us and subscribe to our channel and podcast. We hope we would come back with many more episodes. Thank you so much for listening, and we'll be back with new episode pretty soon.